In the land of liberty and law, where the Constitution promises equal protection to all, the United States legal system is facing a crisis. Not one of laws or legislation alone, but of credibility, consistency, and conscience. Behind the marble columns and Latin mottos, beneath the solemn rituals of the courtroom, is a different truth. Justice in America is often reserved, delayed, distorted, and in too many cases denied. This is the full story, from the courtroom to the jail cell, from the street stop to the Supreme Court, of how real people are fighting for fairness in a system that often fails them. Justice in America begins with ideals: the rule of law, equal protection, due process. But ideals are only as strong as the structures built to uphold them. And our structures are deeply flawed. Start with the Constitution. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a speedy trial, the right to counsel, and the right to confront one's accuser. But in 2025, across counties, states, and federal courts, these rights are routinely undermined. Delays in trial are common. In some jurisdictions, it can take months or years for a defendant to see a courtroom. COVID-19 worsened these backlogs, but the problem predates the pandemic. Courts are understaffed, overburdened, and poorly resourced, particularly public defender offices. In New Orleans, a city with one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, public defenders have described themselves as triage workers. Some lawyers there carry over 200 felony cases at once. One said he had just 7 minutes per case on average. The system was never designed to handle mass arrests, yet every year nearly 10 million people are booked into jails in the United States. Many are held for days or weeks, not because they've been convicted of anything, but because they can't afford. Cash bail is perhaps the most blatant expression of economic injustice in the legal system. A person charged with a misdemeanor might need $500 to go home. A felony could require thousands. If you can't pay, you stay in jail, regardless of guilt. Over 60% of people in U.S. jails today have not been convicted of a crime. They are legally presumed innocent, yet deprived of their liberty. That's not justice. That's pre-conviction punishment. Policing is where the legal system begins for most Americans. And here, inequality is both historical and statistical. Black Americans are 2.8 times more likely to be arrested than white Americans. They're also more likely to be stopped, searched, and subjected to force. In New York's infamous stop and frisk era, over 90% of people stopped were black or Latino. The vast majority were innocent.
The killing of George Floyd in 2020 ignited a global movement.
It forced a reckoning with how law enforcement is used in poor and minority communities. But 5 years later, reforms have been uneven. Some cities have invested in alternatives, unarmed crisis response teams, community mediation programs. But many police departments continue to receive military-grade weapons, even as they struggle to resolve violent crimes. In 2025, the national clearance rate for murder is still below 55%. For rape, it's under 30%. Meanwhile, traffic stops have become a flashpoint. Cases like Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, and Dante Wright show how minor infractions, or no infractions at all, can escalate to tragedy. Racial profiling continues despite reforms. Qualified immunity protects many officers from civil lawsuits. Internal investigations rarely result in discipline. Police unions often negotiate contracts that make accountability almost impossible. When cases do make it to court, what happens next depends heavily on resources. Wealthy defendants can hire legal teams, private investigators, expert witnesses. Poor defendants get public defenders with impossible caseloads. Plea bargaining is the norm. Over 94% of state cases and 97% of federal cases end in guilty pleas. Often, innocent people plead guilty simply to get out of jail or avoid harsher sentences at trial. This is how wrongful convictions happen. Consider Lamont McIntyre, who spent 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. His conviction rested on eyewitness misidentification and prosecutorial misconduct. He had no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and no chance to fight back effectively. In total, over 3,400 people have been exonerated since 1989, losing more than 30,000 years of life to wrongful imprisonment. Judicial discretion is another issue. Sentences vary wildly from judge to judge, even for identical crimes. In one Texas county, a 19-year-old white woman received probation for the murder of her child. In another, A black man was sentenced to life for marijuana possession under a 3 strikes rule. Prosecutors also wield enormous power. They decide whether to charge, what to charge, and whether to offer a plea. In many jurisdictions, they are elected officials, incentivized by conviction rates, not justice. Only a few prosecutors, like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia or Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, have tried reform, with mixed political results. Boudin was recalled. Krasner was nearly impeached. Justice, it seems, is also political. Once someone is sentenced, the system doesn't shift toward healing, it shifts deeper into punishment. Private prisons house about 8% of all U.S. inmates, but their influence is far greater. Companies like CoreCivic and GEO Group profit off each prisoner. Inmates in these facilities often report worse conditions, underpaid staff, and higher rates of violence. Even in public prisons, the conditions are dire. Overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, inadequate medical care, these are not exceptions, but norms. Mental illness is rampant. Suicide is a leading cause of death. Prison labor is widespread. Inmates manufacture furniture, license plates, and even fight wildfires, often for less than $1 per hour. The 13th Amendment bans slavery, except as punishment for a crime. And so, in many ways, prison labor fills that gap. Recidivism is high. 2/3 of people released from prison are rearrested within 3 years. That's not because they are irredeemable, it's because the system does little to prepare them for re-entry. Most leave with criminal records that block them from housing, employment, and education. Without support, many fall back into the same conditions that led to arrest in the first place. Criminal justice isn't the only realm of inequality. The civil justice system, which handles evictions, debt collections, child custody, and more, is largely inaccessible to low-income Americans. There is no constitutional right to an attorney in civil court. Yet the consequences are enormous. An eviction can lead to homelessness. A family court ruling can sever parental rights. A debt judgment can freeze bank accounts. In housing courts, over 90% of landlords have legal representation, compared to fewer than 10% of tenants. In immigration courts, asylum seekers often face complex legal proceedings alone, in a second language, in detention. Then there are the corporate tactics, forced arbitration clauses, class action bans, and non-disclosure agreements that prevent consumers and workers from seeking justice publicly. Women and marginalized genders face unique challenges. Domestic violence survivors may be re-traumatized by hostile court processes. Victims of sexual assault often find their credibility questioned more than their attackers' actions. Meanwhile, reproductive justice is increasingly criminalized. In some states, women who suffer miscarriages or seek abortions are investigated for fetal endangerment. Prosecutors interpret vague laws to target the vulnerable. Despite all this, change is possible, and happening. Bail reform has gained traction. New Jersey, Illinois, and New York have reduced or eliminated cash bail for many offenses. Participatory defense programs are training families to work with public defenders and improve outcomes. Nonprofits like the Innocence Project, Equal Justice Initiative, and Civil Rights Corps are using litigation and public education to expose systemic flaws. Restorative justice is gaining ground, especially in youth cases. Instead of punishment, it focuses on accountability, healing, and reintegration. Community-based public safety models are replacing police in mental health and homelessness crises. In cities like Denver and Eugene, unarmed teams now respond to 911 calls involving nonviolent situations. Technology is also helping. Apps now match people with pro bono lawyers. AI tools analyze court outcomes for bias. Online legal clinics reach rural areas once ignored. And perhaps most importantly, those who survived the system are leading. Formerly incarcerated people are running for office. Public defenders are becoming judges. Activists are writing policy. So where does this leave us in 2025? At a crossroads. Justice is no longer a guarantee, but it is still a possibility, if we're willing to fight for it. That fight means funding public defense as a civil right. It means abolishing for-profit incarceration. It means removing cash bail, prosecutorial immunity, and barriers to re-entry. It means reimagining safety not as control, but care. Real justice is not a courtroom win. It's a system that centers dignity. It's the belief that everyone, regardless of income or skin color or citizenship status, deserves fair treatment under the law. The American legal system is massive, complex, and in many ways broken. But the people rising to fix it are many. From lawyers to organizers, teachers to survivors, the movement is growing. Because justice delayed is justice denied. Board cash bail.